I just want to say that I'm partial to Dr. Harvard, and it was quick and hopefully painless, but I do really like Dr. Harvard this episode.
Rest in power, Dr. Harvard.
It's going to be a sad one today, guys. Season 4, Episode 7, titled Layaway. We've got a great show for you, and as always, this is a true podcast, and we're going to have a lot of fun today. Great discussion. All right, Dan, so this episode started off pretty fast, pretty hot, and pretty spicy. Orietta is baking at the beginning, and this is just great to see her once more in her element. Besides, like, murdering people, I think she's a very good baker, I would imagine. Everything she bakes looks really good. You know what I mean? Anyways, then it cuts, and we really get right into it this episode. What we've been calling for, I want to say, like three weeks now. Harvard finally gets his macaroon, as he's partial to them. Fun scene. She gives him the macaroon, and he dies like immediately. He could still be alive. It's always that saying in TV shows or movies, if you don't see them die fully, they could still very much be alive. So we'll see, but I just can't see how Orietta would get out of that one. She's also the title in this one. It's like right away too. There's no build up to the title, which is fine. Macaroon, Italian cookie, and the Fadas really want, or at least Josto really wants, Dr. Harvard out of the way. And I thought that was interesting. And if this is the last time we see Harvard, it will be sad, but also he gave us the best of Harvard at the end when he ate the macaroon. He like bites it in the most ridiculous way. It makes like a nice crisp noise. It's like, and he's like, oh yes, like, oh, he's like in love with it. And I wrote, him eating it is so good. It is so funny. And like I said earlier, he immediately dies. Orietta has a great bit where she goes in, she looks at the letter. There's also Devil Watch in full effect. It goes to Harvard's eyes, and she is like in red. It harkens back definitely to just like devil imagery, which is super cool. And you know we're on Devil Watch. And then she has the great final bit where she like pretends to be scared at first, and then she's like, no, that's not doing that. That's not doing it for me. And then she goes back and fully screams, and not a crazy scream. I think Orietta's not the best actor. And then she leaves, and one of the other nurses or secretaries come in to help Dr. Harvard. But crazy opening scene. Really nailed it with the predictions, I think, on this one.
Yeah, I've got 3 big takeaways from this first scene. You touched on all 3 of them, but the first, of course, I mean, we got to give a moment of silence to Dr. Harvard, because we are the presidents of the Harvard Simp fan club.
Hell yeah. Great performance.
We've loved Harvard all season, and so seeing him go, I mean, at the very least, he's in a coma, or he's paralyzed, but more than likely dead. Like you said, he gave us everything that we loved about Harvard. He licks his fingers, and he also, when he described how he had just had a full lunch, and he like touches his belly.
So good.
It's really great. Harvard was a joy this season, and so I just needed to point that out. Then also, what I think is interesting is that we've been predicting that Orietta was going to kill Harvard for Josto, but it's really not. It's actually for herself, because she just wants to get that letter. She kills Harvard just so she can read that letter, which is wild. That's a good moment of this show, revealing more about the characters. That is a very clear action, and it's a very self-motivated action. And so she is insane, and I love it. The third thing that you mentioned is just major Devil Watch. Major Devil Watch action. I thought they were going to go even further. I thought she was going to start sprouting horns and hooves.
We got pretty close, honestly. That silhouette was pretty haunting.
I also do just want to mention, or I guess ask you, if you were Dr. Harvard, would you take the vanilla, the chocolate, or the strawberry macaroon?
You know this about me, Dan. I do not eat sweets. So I wouldn't take any, but personally, if I was Dr. Harvard, I just had a big lunch, I would go with vanilla. I think vanilla is a very palate cleansing flavor. He went with the right choice there. It is really funny, though, that it's like immediate poison.
Yes.
Like, in almost every form of media, you don't see poison acting that fast. But literally, as soon as it like started going down his throat, he like started convulsing.
And that also says quite a bit about Orietta, too, because she makes up, there's a bunch of macaroons in that container, and all it took was one to kill a man.
Also, it's interesting to note that her other poison that she used for the Smutnies, which Swanee ended up ingesting, was a little slower. Like, she had to digest it till she started getting gas and stuff. Also, fart watch. Not too much farts lately. I'm hoping in the finale we'll get some more fart go, but we'll have to wait and see. She just wanted to see the letter. And she doesn't know immediately. And we'll talk about this in predictions where we think that's going to go. But it's very clear that Ethel left her diary there. That's going to tie back in.
Yeah, definitely. The concerned citizen was emphasized. Either those words will be within that diary that Ethel left behind, or it's just the handwriting or something. Yeah.
I was thinking like the cursive kind of gave it away. But anyways, overall, very good opening scene. And I think it kind of ties in with my issue with this season overall. We've been talking about it, very novelistic. Yeah. We only get one Orietta chapter this week, which is a bummer. Because I think if I was reading this in a book, I would love every Orietta chapter so much. But I just want to see more of her.
Yeah, and also, it seems like they're taking the opportunity to put the weird scenes right up at the front of the episodes. Like, the weirdest scene is the one that they put in the front, because it seems like they just can't fit it in anywhere else. So they're just like, it'll hook people.
And it's interesting because I feel like scenes like that typically happen at the end of Fargo episodes. Like you get that AC scene from season 3 that's so good. But this season really like ends on like, I don't want to say low points because that like insinuates that it's not good. But I would say just like at like it ends with a chess piece moved. And there's always like the last line of each episode this season is pretty much like, do you think this is going to be okay? And it's like, like maybe, probably. And then it ends. I think I think cliffhangers are cheap anyways. So I do appreciate that they're more solemn endings and not like, holy crap, Lloyd just like punched someone in the face. Anyways, the next scene is the Fadas. A lot of Fadas cannons this episode. They go back and forth. Pretty interesting. Huge chess pieces by Josto and Loy moved, and we'll see where that goes. They are over the body of whoever that guy is. Very sad, and I think the saddest part is at the end they just go, leave him for the birds.
Yeah, poor guy. I mean, at least the actor got like another day of work probably, so that's great. Good for him. Good for his agent. They cashed in there. Yeah, I mean, his whole story was just, I mean, it was depressing. He shows up for 5 seconds and then gives this incredible story about like how he's like the most hopeful character in the season. He's like, I can do it. You can do it. We can all make it.
And then he's like, you know what? I'm not going to kill this kid. I'm going to, oh my God. And then like he gets shot and dies. And
then left for the birds.
Will his wife be angry about that? Who knows?
You mean what's her face?
Then the cannons come next. And Loy is a different character this episode, I will say. I think he's very upset about Dr. Senator in this scene. And Loy beats Leon, which is pretty crazy. And Opal tells him like, no, he's Happy's cousin and we need Happy. So like you can't like kill him or beat him or anything, which is interesting to note that yes, the cannons are all family, but they're also there's different categories of them. If he killed Leon there, it would have affected like their manpower, which is super interesting. And Gaetano looks really bad. He's gotten beat up pretty bad.
I wrote down in my notes at the top of the scene, I wrote down, Loy is not intimidating, like at all. It's another moment where I'm just looking at the Chris Rock performance and thinking, where could you improve some things? Where could you try to maybe heighten this? I think by the end of the scene, I mean, since it's become so physical at the end of the scene, he like is able to get more into it, and I think he becomes a little bit more intimidating. But then besides just the performance issues, It's interesting that Loy, he whips his own guy. Like, he's whipping him with a belt, and I think that iconography and that visual is pretty powerful. It's really just every time Loy gives a big monologue or has a long dialogue scene, I'm kind of just waiting for it to end, because usually the point is made at the end. Like, he does a whole speech either about the construct of America or about something that will relate to the construct of America, and then at the end he's like, this is about the construct of America, and we're like, oh, okay, yeah, I get it. It's like a bad essay where you write and you write and you write, and then at the very last paragraph you're like, and this is my thesis.
You're like, oh wait, this is what I was writing about this whole time. I really like this next scene. It's Otis and Defi. All of this is really building up to these confrontations that happen later, and Otis has really grown on me the last couple episodes. I really like his character.
Same here, yeah. Big change for me as well.
And as we always say, Jack Houston does a fantastic job. I just thought it was really funny, though. Otis is just chilling in his car, which is kind of a reoccurring thing in the reoccurring gag in this episode. Defi just walks in, like he just opens the door and it's like, hey, what's up? Also, Timothy Olyphant, a lot of fun. He was just in The Mandalorian, and that was a kind of fun episode. Super Western vibe, though, in this scene. He's like, what if we just go in there and shoot him up? Like, we'll just fucking go in there, guns blazing, and then go out. And then, obviously, he's like, I was just joking. Like, we'd all die. We'd die if the two of us just went in there, which is pretty funny. He also talks about, like, his God side a lot. I forgot he is a Mormon. That was one of his character traits in episode 3 when he was first introduced. A lot of fun. And finally, Defi confronts Otis about all the stuff with the cannons and the fadas, and it's just like, oh my god, finally. Like, Defi has been watching him so long, and it's like, it's finally like, okay, we finally made our peace with that. Like, and it does affect Otis, because later in the episode he's trying to leave town. At least he does not succeed, but seems like Defi's onto him, and we'll see where it goes, really. Defi's such an odd character, really. Like, I don't know how he's going to play into the ending, really, because I feel like we don't know too much about him still.
Yeah, we really don't know anything about him. The charm of Oliphant is just is good enough for me in all of his scenes. When, it is funny that he just keeps showing up in Otis's life. Like, that's been his character. He watches him, and then he appears and then freaks him out, and then Otis is like, get out of here.
May I say something? You could call Defi Otis's zombie man, really.
Whoa.
Yeah, isn't that crazy?
Okay.
Yeah, because Defi really haunts Otis, like, throughout the season, and he is maybe the angel on his shoulder or the devil, who knows, but there is a weird parallel between them, because Defi just shows up most of the time in Otis's life in weird areas.
No, yeah, I love it. Also in the scene, though, Defi has a moment where, or I guess Otis swears at one point, and then Defi's like, language, which is just like a funny thing. It was a bit in the Avengers, and it's always kind of funny.
Yeah, and I would say the most interesting song choices, like music choices, it would be the non-diegetic. The music choices with Otis have been really cool this season. Like, they very much feel like OCD with all of the beats and stuff. And I think that's also a reason Otis is growing on me, because he kind of has his own theme song.
The music is all good, but it's so secondary most of the time. And then when it does come in, it's usually the same 3 themes. It's like these clicking sort of drum pieces for Otis. It's that one really cool piano. And then there's the music that ended this episode also, that's come in a few times, or at least variations on that. It's just the big swelling, intense, like we're going to war music.
I think there's so much in this season that we could talk about for hours. And music is like, because neither of us are musicians, so I feel like we don't talk about it too much, but it is so important. Anyways, Calamita goes and visits the Cannon's house. Really great scene for Loy's wife, Mrs. Cannon. Calamita is suave. She tells a little story about like lions and stuff, and I was like, okay, here we go. And then she like pulls out a shotgun, and I'm like, okay, that was actually totally worth it. A lot of fun. She has a great line about that was a rhetorical question. Honestly, Calamita's kind of a schoolyard bully, like Dr. Senator said a few episodes ago. He's all talk and no game. So next episode for Calamita is going to be really interesting because there is a hit on him right now.
I love Calamita so much. This season, I liked him right from the start. He was one of those guys that he had a defined look and a defined characteristic. He looks awesome. He acts awesome. And you're right. The word suave is a perfect way to describe him. I don't imagine that he'll get a ton of American work going forward because there's not a ton of American work for Italian actors that's, mostly do Italian language stuff. But God, I hope he does. I hope I see him in more things because he's so incredible in this show. And in this one small scene, even later, when we'll talk about it later, but when he's just investigating Rabbi Milligan's room, I'm like, the way he's walking is good. It's kind of the opposite of the Chris Rock problem. I feel like Calamita is sort of undefined as a character a lot, for the most part. We don't know that much about his backstory, but he's taking action. It's revealing some of his character, and then he, through his performance, is also just so infinitely watchable and interesting. And it makes me ask more questions, whereas when I'm watching Loy, I'm like, the only question I'm asking is like, when is this going to be over?
Yeah, exactly. And there, you hit the nail on the head. There's a real mystery to Calamita that's nice. So then we go to the Smutny household, and slash the cannons. Lemuel is just like working, and this is kind of a weird scene for me. We'll get into why later. And one of our favorite characters appears. But they're moving in some stuff. It's clear that the Smutny household's getting taken over by the cannons, and like we need a scene like that, obviously. I saw like Lemuel and Ethel talking, and I'm like, oh, they're kind of the same age, and like maybe they're like, if the season was like 10 episodes longer, they'd have like a little like romantic thing for some reason. I just kind of got that feeling, and especially this next part kind of made me feel like there should be an entanglement somehow because there's a coffin because there was just a funeral there, and our friend little or I guess he's big zombie man peeks up for a second, like you were saying before we started recording. He's a little shy this episode, but the most interesting part was that he is real. He at least like in the household so far, but we've seen him outside the household too. So like he's real for the Smutnies and now someone who's not a part of the Smutnies, unless Lemuel's somewhat connected to Ethel one day somehow. This was the first time that a non-Smutny heard Zombie Man because he peeked out and then Lemuel like knocked on the coffin afterwards. So we'll see if that leads to anything. Looks like Zombie Man's going to be in a few more episodes because they're slowly building him up. And is it like the third or fourth episode in a row we've seen him? Like we've seen him like a lot this season.
The way that you started off describing the scene is how I felt as well. It's sort of weird. I feel like nothing really was accomplished by it. It was a scene that you could kind of, cross off unless the Zombie Man portion of it becomes something really important later down the road. And they needed to hint at that early on in this episode. Because we already know that the Smutny household is going to be taken over by the cannons. It could have just been included in one of those sweet montages that they keep doing. But instead they decided to have a full scene and include our little shy zombie man. He's not such a big zombie man this week. It's kind of sad to see. He's a little nervous. He's a little bit scared of the new people in the house.
Maybe he's a little sleepy because he was up so late watching Ethel's birthday party.
He probably had a slice of cake. He probably had, a little bit too much sugar. He crashed.
Yeah, he's just a little guy. Like I joked earlier. Like, but how? Okay, here's a question, Dan.
Yeah.
How old do you think Zombie Man is?
Great question. If Zombie Man is the entity that's been cursing the Smutny family for what could be generations, he could be anywhere between 50 and 250.
Anyways, next, Calamita is visiting Rabbi Milligan slash Satchel's old room. It's really nicely shot, a lot of blues, and I think just like, I mean, the actor's named Gaetano, which is really funny, but the Calamita is just really cool in this scene, and it's great. And then it has that nice little montage with all the fadas, and it starts out. I think this might be some foreshadowing for Calamita, especially with what happens at the end of the episode. But it cuts him off at the head. And I think that could definitely be foreshadowing to him either dying or even getting decapitated later in this season.
That's a great call. We'll talk about that more in predictions, but that's definitely a great call. That's not something I noticed when I first watched it. In the scene, though, it is super moody and super pretty. Calamita just glides through a room. You have your eyes fixed on him at all times. And he finds the newspaper clipping in the, I guess that was the Bible or a book or something. Super small, fun to watch. This is a scene that sort of, it represents what's fun about television, because you get so much extended time with television compared to movies that you can have just a moody scene like this take its time. Because they could have just, again, included him finding the newspaper clipping as a part of the montage, but they give him a full minute and a half or so of just moving through the space and then building into the montage.
Yeah, it's nice. I think Calamita is such a character that if in a Godfather movie, he would just be like a background character, but he does have some scenes of his own in this, and it's pretty nice to just see. I would say he's the muscle, really. He tries to intimidate, and he usually gets what he wants, so. Okay, and then next is where the good stuff comes. The fadas and the cannons meet, and a lot of chess pieces are moved. Just to start it out, Josto has a great line where it goes like, if we're not back in 30 minutes, start shooting. Joe Bulo is in the background. Most interestingly, Defi is also watching, which very voyeuristic of him, and it's a classic. It's a classic Defi thing this season. Anyways, Josto and Ebel go inside to talk to Loy. It starts off really nice, actually. Ebel basically apologizes about Dr. Senator, and he's like, he was my friend, which is really sweet. And the cafe scenes really paid off because they did create a bond. I would say without that Milligan scene last episode, Ebel and Dr. Senator had the biggest bond out of anyone this season, I would say. That's not directly romantic or family or anything. Anyways, Ebel wants peace, so he's going to cut a deal. The original deal is Gaetano comes back, he flies back to Italy, and then you get half of the slaughterhouse and a bunch of other stuff. And then Josto goes, actually, Calamita killed Satchel, and I understand that's very hard for you to hear, and Loy kind of flips out at that point, and he's basically and I know that's hard for you to hear, and I know you want to kill someone, so if you're gonna kill anyone, just kill Gaetano, because that'll make it easy. And it's really funny that Josto is just so open about it. He doesn't try to hide. I think there would have been a way if he was smarter, to figure out a way for Lloyd just to kill Gaetano without just telling him to kill Gaetano, because you never do what your enemy tells you to do, and that's something Lloyd does later in the episode that's pretty smart. But yeah, big Josto move. Halloween season, so I just thought I would say this. One of Loy's men looks like Freddy Krueger. he's out of focus, and he has that sweater and a hat. So I thought that was kind of funny. Josto has a great line, life for a life. And again, he makes another move, and he says Calamita killed Satchel. So Calamita's on Loy's hit list now, and he basically just puts it all there, and he's like, this is how for Josto, this is how he's going to get rid of Gaetano. And I thought that was just a hugely big move. for Josto to pull, and something he didn't tell Ebel either, because Ebel was just confused, but since Ebel's just loyal to the Fadas, he just agrees to do it.
Love the scene. I love the chess game that's being played. I do wish that, again, I feel like a broken record and I feel bad for saying it, but I do wish that they played Josto more seriously. He is doing very serious stuff in the scene, and it comes from the idea is really funny in and of itself, that he really just wants his brother dead. That's hilarious, and I think towards the end of the scene it is really funny. He literally just says kill Gaetano instead of Zero. I laughed out loud. I thought that was really funny. He's still kind of just standing back, behind Ebel in the scene, and he's he has that weird moment where he laughs thinking of something, and I don't know. I just wish that in that scene he took charge a little bit more. I mean, he is taking charge, but I don't feel the presence of someone taking charge. I wish that he sort of stepped up, made it seem a little bit more basically like what you said. I wish that he didn't telegraph that he wanted Gaetano dead so easily. And I think the way that you do that would be to make him appear more serious in the scene. You like you mentioned, Ebel is you got the sense in those cafe scenes that there was an actual respect between Ebel and Dr. Senator. And that comes through in this scene as well. When Loy says, don't say his name. Again, it goes back to the Loy being sort of a different character this episode. He's super upset about Dr. Senator this episode, which he probably should have been last episode. And I think that in this scene, it gets to one of the core issues I have with Loy Cannon as a character, not the performance, but just the character. All season, his thing has been about getting Satchel back and winning also. But that's his core drive, is to get his son back. That's what they keep hitting on over and over. But they also show us multiple times that he's not really a family man, at all. He doesn't spend time with the family that he has at home. He doesn't really care for his wife that much. He doesn't even really care for that many members of the Cannon crew that he has. So I don't at any point during the season really believe that he's a family man. And so that every time they keep telling me oh, he's really emotional because Satchel is dead, I just don't really buy it. I thought he did a good job in the scene though, Rock that is, of selling oh no, my son is dead. This changes everything. And I do think that the narrative then takes a really sharp turn, which is really exciting. But I just don't believe, and I don't care much for Loy Cannon.
Yeah, and that's the biggest bummer, because I feel like the whole crux of this season is that you have to care about Loy Cannon and Josto, and we have issues with both of them. But who knows? I think with Otis, he's really grown on us, and maybe I think this was a good Josto and Loy episode. It's just still a little tweaking that needs to be going on. But again, that's the beauty. Maybe they're characterized differently than what we ever expected. So we'll see where their stories go, really.
Right, and I do love Loy in this episode. The scenes that he has later, and
yeah,
we'll talk about it later, but just the amount of time that they give him made me care more about him.
Yeah, and so Josto has a nice scene where he's smoking, and it's wow, he just made his big play. And that was the last time we see Josto this episode. And then this is the really good Loy stuff. Loy is debating on killing Zero. He gets really close, and I was thinking oh, he might do it. That'd be pretty rough, and I don't think I'd like Loy ever again. But then he realizes that's too far. He goes into his bedroom, and there's just a cry. It cuts to the outside, and it is very sad. He clearly told his wife about Satchel, who has vanished. Satchel is still alive, but safe with Rabbi Milligan. But that's what Josto decided to tell Loy, and this really does change everything. And then it ends with him in a car. And this is something you were talking about last episode that we finally got a nice into. I would say I think they're not going to touch on it more after this, but there's a poster of a white family, and it's saying just say charge it, and it's it's called a credit card, and it's clear that someone stole his idea, And I was just thinking about this. There has been a significant time jump from the beginning of this season. I feel like Satchel just looks older. Like the last episode we saw him, and then in these flashbacks especially, like he looks super young. I don't know whether that's like reshoots or not, but it seems like a good amount has passed, and I definitely bought that credit card poster. And it's just kind of sad, like Loy's really down right now, and he's going to have to make some moves if he wants to continue.
Yeah, really happy that they paid off the credit card thing. We talked about this in predictions from previous episodes, but yeah, I was really expecting all year, ever since they first laid out that credit card plan, that somebody was just going to steal it from him, because that's been the history of African American invention in America for as long as they've been here. And so I think we called that in the very first episode, actually. I think I said, like, that's the history of African Americans in this country, and that's what's going to happen, is somebody's going to straight up just take the credit card idea. I hope that it I kind of want it to continue. Like, I want this to be a continued storyline. I hope that it was just literally lifted from him by that guy that works at the bank, and then we can get more bank stuff later, but probably not. It's probably just the end here. But it was really nice. It was really nice to see that.
And there were no words, you don't even need to say it, which is always great. Then we have another flashback, a lot of flashback heavy episode, with Otis and his girlfriend singing to him. Kind of sad. I'll get more into some tropes that I noticed with Otis this episode. But then Otis started packing. There's a nice like time lapse, which I think we saw earlier this season. I can't think of who did it, but it might have been Orietta cleaning or cooking or something, and we kind of saw something similar to that. It's a nice time lapse. And he puts everything in individually, which is very Otis. And then there's a beautiful shot of him coming down the stairs, and like he's holding like two cases, and like he's getting out of town, like very classic like old Hollywood movie, trying to get away. And then Opal and some of the other cannons are there, and they have a funny line.
I don't get in your car, you get in mine. That's the funniest thing. Otis really is working for me now. It just flipped last episode. It's because of two things. One, I mentioned this, or I alluded to this earlier. In the previous scenes with Loy, we just get like 4 straight Loy scenes. There's no chopping it up. And that's so important, because then by the time we see him see the billboard, we've just spent like 10 minutes with him, as opposed to 2 minutes here, and then 2 minutes and 15 minutes, and then 2 minutes after another 15 minutes. We're just getting more time with him, and so I buy the emotion a little bit more. Same thing with Otis. We got a lot of Otis last episode, and this flashback, although sort of tropey and cliched, it's just more. It's just more of him, and then we see him packing things up. Really, he's really in a bad situation, and allowing him to just live in his space, to pack, to think back on better days. All of it is just making me like him more. And I'm sure that when I rewatch this season, I will retroactively like him more in the first few episodes as well, because of the stuff that they're now doing with him. They're building him up, and he still is funny too, but they're also adding some more emotional depth and some more importance to him. I think that's really the issue, is like early in the season, I didn't see his importance or his real value. And now they're really shoving him into the story, and they're making him a very important character, and it's all just working.
I would say he's probably 4th build, like just in importance. Like for me, it probably goes like Loy and Josto tied, Orietta, and then I would say Otis, which is pretty surprising because I feel like Jack Houston wasn't really marketed this season. Like he seems more important than Ethel right now, which is kind of crazy. Anyways, then Otis goes to the cannon facility. There's some nice Zelmar and Swanee stuff. They have a stupid line about onions. I honestly think in a post Shrek world, you can never talk about onions like that, because then it gets too memey. Like the whole, like you're like an onion because you have layers, and it's like I've heard it in Shrek too.
That's a great call. And also, let's just briefly talk about this because they've done it a few times now this season, and this is where like auteurism is going off the rails a little bit this season. It's there have been multiple times where characters are entering a scene in the middle of a conversation when we enter the scene, and you can tell it's just like they're just making stuff up. Because if that was written, then like shame on you, Noah Hawley, or whoever wrote this episode, because that's such a meme. But yeah, it seemed like so much of like just say some filler, and we'll just kind of muffle it so we don't actually hear it. But then they come up with something on the day when they're filming that everyone laughs at, and they're like, oh, that's so funny. Let's actually put it in the episode.
Oh, that is cool. Oh, you recently watched Shrek. That's cool. Swanee has a great line. Swanee has two great lines in this brief scene that she's in. She says, "Gotta die someplace," because like someone says she's gonna die. And then her last line as she's going out, which really works for me as opposed to their first line coming in, is because they're going off to Philadelphia because Loy gave them tickets. And this is also something I was talking about. Like, Loy is cutting a deal with them. He's like done using them, which feels like Loy would just kill them to like get the problem away, you know, or just like keep using them. So it is interesting that he's showing some mercy to them and letting them just live their lives again. But as she's going, Swanee goes, "It's been a sad parade." And I just really like that line. I think it's great. But yeah, 10 o'clock train, they're gone. But they will be in next episode, it looks like, in a very good way. Then Loy kind of goes off on Otis, like talking more story stuff. He talks about like elevating and not denigrating, which is kind of interesting. More American Dream talk, classic Loy. And the thing that he said that was really interesting in this, like the Fadas can't rise to his level, so he has to go down to their level, which he doesn't want to do because that's what they're expecting. That's what they want. So he tells Otis he's not going to kill Gaetano.
Yeah, that bit about, you know, fighting in the mud or the dirt is really great. One issue I do have with this season is the actual like racial aspects of Loy are kind of weak in terms of like the allegory and the analogy, and he is a black character, but it kind of feels like written by white people a little bit because they're not going deep enough with the racial stuff, in my opinion. They every now and then give Loy a monologue about what it is to be African American in America in 1950s Kansas City, but that's all. That's pretty much the extent of it. It's just a couple of monologue lines. We had the lines in the last episode about the dolls at Otis's place and how you would feel if they had an uprising, and then in this one he's talking about which again this is a great line and a great bit where he's talking about how they can't rise to his level. So they're trying to pull him down, and if he does that, then it's actually what they're expecting of him. Like that's a thing that I've heard many times in regards to like race relations. But it doesn't really go much further than that. It's sort of just words. In an unfair way, I was expecting this season to comment more on race in America than it ended up actually doing.
Yeah. And we do have 4 episodes left, so we'll see. But I definitely agree with that sentiment. I think there's something, like when you're watching something like Moonlight, like a queer perspective, and like you really feel that in the writing and like the directing by Barry Jenkins. And then to contrast that, something like Mulan 2020 is like very void of like any culture or any like loving respect for Mulan. As a character, and I feel like you can just tell when like someone like really understands something as opposed to they're just like writing it. And I feel like at some points with the race stuff, Noah Hawley, because he's writing most of the season, is missing the mark a bit. But I definitely think it's still good. It's just like you can kind of tell that it's a little hollow on the inside.
Right, it's all very intellectual, but there's not much feeling behind it. Like you can like as we're talking right now, I can explain racism pretty well in a Webster's definition, but I don't know what that feels like, you know? Monologues kind of feel like to me. It just feels like a very intellectual and very well thought out and very well intentioned comment on racism, but it doesn't really fully work for me. The point of the scene, Loy has to do two things. He has to inform Otis that Satchel is dead. And then the second thing is end the scene by bringing Otis in and saying, like, what are we going to do together now? Because, like, you're a part of this. And it takes them so long to get there. And we have to sit through so much monologue. And it just is another scene where the point is made at the very end. There's so little that has to be accomplished, and they really milk it to the maximum, and they really try to do as much as possible to give you the smallest amount of information.
In the last scene, Gaetano in chains for the last time. And, you know, Loy makes a deal. And Gaetano is really, like, he's really good in this scene, I think. It's, like, very subtle. It's very, like, his head's down. His eyes are, like, all fucked up. And, yeah, there's, like, a real, like, surprise. Because at the beginning, he's, like, hyping himself up still. He's, like, saying all of the people he's killed in his life. And, like, describing it in depth. And, again, I feel like he's the most over-the-top character. But even him, like, being, you know, messed up, like, he was, like, whispering it. And it was, like, really well done. Shout out to Gaetano this episode. But yeah, he is shocked when Loy releases him, and everyone just like goes. Loy then orders Calamida's death, and then him and Opal just hang out for a bit, and a prelude to the next chapter of this war that has slowly started. But the next few episodes should be pretty bloody.
It's funny, we've been saying that for like weeks now. Like the war has begun, and then it kind of has, but it also kind of hasn't. I think they could have done a slightly better job of maybe emphasizing that this is a Cold War right now, and like there's little aggressions that are happening, but we're not truly in war. You mentioned it earlier, but a lot of episodes basically end with characters being like, is this a good decision? I don't know. Find out next week. And then we find out next week that maybe it was, but also it wasn't. Like, there's not really... Everything is consequential this season, as it always is in Fargo, but the characters aren't kind of as on the hook for those decisions. There hasn't been a ton of consequence happening to each of the characters. Like, we're just building up and building up and building up until the end of the season where something will absolutely explode. The powder keg will explode.
Transitioning a bit, if we're good with that. Aw heck moment of the week for me was that line by Swanee that I said earlier. She said, "It's been a sad parade," and I think Fargo inherently is a sad parade. Just envisioning like a rainy day, and like there's just a parade going down Main Street on like Thanksgiving, or like even like a stupider holiday like Groundhog's Day, and everyone's just sad, and it's just like I guess this is a nice little league parade, but it is just kind of like I guess we're wasting a bunch of gas on this one, and that is just my aw heck moment of the week. I think that juxtaposition just represents Fargo really well.
That's a good pick. I'm gonna go with Josto selling out Calamita and telling Loy to kill Gaetano. I think that scene is it's pretty much Fargo. It's a character who is inept, making deals, or I should say, writing checks that their ass can't cash. That's Fargo all the way. He pulls this chess piece out as a last resort to get what he wants, and it's definitely going to blow up in his face because it's going to lead to the war whenever that actually begins.
All right, so predictions.
There's only one place to start, and that's with Harvard. Is he alive or is he dead? Give me some hope. Tell me that you believe in your heart that Harvard is still alive.
I believe that Harvard, she did say get a doctor at the end, which makes me believe Harvard will be in a coma at one point. And then in an ironic twist of fate, his nurse will be Orietta. And Orietta will just kill him that way. Like, Orietta either has killed him now, and that's it, or, which I think would be very Fargo and very funny, in that ironic nature, she ends up killing him in the hospital.
Because, just thinking logically, Orietta, she knows what the outcome is of giving him that macaroon. She either knows that whatever poison she put in there was going to kill him, or she also knew that it was going to paralyze him because she just poisoned the man. Like, he'll tell on her if he isn't paralyzed or dead. So she knows whatever the outcome is. If we do get to see him again, it would be a sweet treat, though.
Gaetano is released now, and he knows Justo wanted him dead, which is the biggest thing, I think. And I think this is going to lead to a huge fight or civil war with Gaetano and Justo. Like we said last predictions, if Gaetano got out of his cage, like, who knows what's going to happen. And he's out of his cage now, and I think Justo is in huge trouble.
In our previous predictions, we mentioned that we thought that the cannons were going to feed Gaetano this information that Justo is trying to sell him down the river. And of course they did that, because of course they should, because that's great plotting. That's really good story. And I'm really happy that Gaetano's out. I think it's a really bold move by Loy to actually let him out, because he is a psycho. And in this episode, he's counting off all the people he's killed and how he's killed them with their own shirts and whatnot.
Like, he could totally just turn on the cannons too. This is like I would say it's a high risk, low reward, really, situation for Loy, at least, just because, like, the reward he's going to get is just, like, the best thing possible to come out of this is that, like, Justo and Gaetano continue to fight and one of them kills the other, but then you still have the other brother who's upset at you. And I mean, personally, if I was Loy, like, I think the safest bet would just be to get rid of Gaetano. But obviously, I think for the story, like, Gaetano's, like, too fun of a character to just, like, kill off like that. So again, I think a little plot armor for him, but it's definitely going to be exciting.
Early in the season, we said we wouldn't be surprised if Justo died, like episode 7 or 8. And Gaetano took over. And we also wouldn't be surprised if Gaetano died around then, and then it solidified Justo as the lead. I think the curious thing here is how long they're going to stretch this out, because it's one or the other. One of those two is going to die. It would be very Fargo of them to have Gaetano on a mission. He goes to the store, he buys a gun or a knife or something. It's a long montage setting up his getting prepared to go to war. He shows up at the compound and then he gets offed immediately.
Yeah, there's like a whole montage with the cashier, and he's like all bloodied and stuff, and he's like, I'm going to buy this knife. Like, this is my knife. And they're like, okay, like, you're gonna have to pay for it though. And he's like, I have no money. Like, it would be like a classic fucking Fargo
in
thing.
Italy.
In Italy, this is why I hate America. You do not trust people to come back and pay their debt.
And also, it would be very Noah Hawley of them to do that, because whenever they have the opportunity to pull from other Coen Brothers movies, they do. That would be a very No Country for Old Men scene. Like,
all these performers are so good, and they bring a lot of depth to each character, and it's just going to be interesting to see where they go. And kind of on Calamita, I think Calamita's dead next episode. I can't see him coming out of next episode. That's going to be like my big prediction for this next episode, is that Calamita's dead, especially with the foreshadowing. I think it's just very clear, because everyone wants him dead.
The only person that doesn't want him dead is Gaetano, and he's not in a position to really do anything about it.
Exactly. So I think Calamida's days are numbered, and I even thought maybe he would have died this episode, but I'm glad I get to make this prediction, and we'll see. You know, I think this is our first prediction that we're like, this is gonna happen next episode. So fingers crossed that it does. There are 4 episodes left. And I said that last week, but there were actually 5. So apparently there is an 11th episode this season, which would explain the pacing. And FX did that with Atlanta season 2. And I just like hate it because it's like, I just love when seasons are like the same number, you know? And if this is like new Fargo, like each season will have 11 episodes, I'm good with it. But it would just be weird if season 4 just had 11 episodes.
Yeah, it's setting off my Otis Weff OCD. Like that's the big issue is like I want it to be clean, I want it to be evenly numbered, and I want it to be 10, 10, 10, 10, 10 forever. Unless that 11th episode is like a coda episode. Like what if they finish the story through 10 episodes, or maybe through like 10 and a quarter, which they actually did in season 2. They wrapped the story up. Basically all the action is done in the previous episode 9. And then in the beginning of episode 10, they set it up like, oh, they got to go get Hansi, but then Hansi gets away. And then there's still 40 minutes left of the episode, and it's just everybody being like, well, that was wild. Yeah, let's all get back home.
Okay, so I think in the trailer, Elmore and Swanee were kind of caught in between. We're caught basically at the train station, so it will be interesting to see where they go. Any thoughts on our 2 favorite cons?
Is it definitely the train station? That's my only question. Because it could be a bank also.
Yeah, I was about to say that. They could be robbing a different bank and just like going off the rails because that's how they live life.
Right, so I think the only question is whether they come back into the story by choice or if it's by circumstance, like they get caught. Maybe Deafy actually does something and he follows them to the train station and he's like, you're under arrest. And they're like, no, we're not. And then they run out and big chase ensues. But they're going to come back into the story and then their main purpose will be to serve the Smutny family, I would assume, because now they're in a real bad situation. Their house is being taken over. The cannons kind of suck. But I also can't imagine them taking action against Loy because Loy just gave them a free ticket to Philadelphia. So their motivation to come back in is kind of questionable. So it would make sense if they actually did get picked up by a Deafy or an Otis and then forced back into the story.
Definitely forced, because right now it seems like their story is pretty much over. And then Loy, I'm not sure. I'm gonna say Loy's gonna have a smaller episode next week. Like I think this was a huge Loy episode, and I feel like every episode is, but I don't know. I just feel like there's not too much you can go with Loy right now, and obviously they can just like make up stuff every episode to have an arc for him, but it will be interesting. Because last week he was going off the rails. This week he's kind of like back on the rails, I think.
Yeah, 2 thoughts. One is about Gaetano. I'll come back to that in a second. But first, something that you just made me think of was, there's not a ton for Loy to actually do going forward. He's just the boss. He's just making decisions. He's not actually going out and doing the grunt work. And that just made me realize that this season, unlike the other seasons, is about the bosses as opposed to, ordinary people. And that's kind of one of the things that's crippling, for me at least, this season, is Josto and Loy. Neither of them can actually go out and do anything. They just tell other people to do stuff. That's why all the side characters are our favorite characters this season. It's because they're actually out and doing things. They're making all the actions at the behest of Loy and Josto, but still, those 2 aren't actually doing anything. So you kind of wonder, like, at what point will they actually have to get their hands dirty, if at all?
If at all, yeah. No, because I think a perfect example is Floyd Gerhardt from season 2. She was the boss. And she was a very interesting character, but she did not do stuff a lot. And same with like Moses Tripoli who is Hansi, but Moses Tripoli from season 1, like he just told people what to do. That's a great point, and definitely a reason why we're kind of like, oh, this feels kind of stuck at some points, and it's literally because like we'd actually in a normal Fargo season be focusing on like Leon.
And also what you just mentioned about Floyd and about Tripoli, those characters are really cool too. I've got no problem with they're awesome, but they're not the main character, and that's the big difference. Is because they can do their cool stuff on the side, and we can learn more about them. But that's their role. They're over on the side.
Let's just talk. They weren't in this episode like we predicted last episode. Milligan and Satchel. Do you think they're coming back anytime soon?
I think we'll get them next episode, because I think next episode is set up to be, I forget which episode it was in season 3, but when Swanko is taken on the bus, and the bus flips, and then they have to go into the woods, and it's the big Mr. Wrench episode. So we're going to get a sweet little chase situation. We're going to get Calamita on the tail of somebody, and we're going to get somebody on the tail of Calamita.
We barely talked about it this episode, but let's talk about some Devil Watch. Orietta, there was a clip of her with Josto having sex, some kinky stuff. So we'll see how it goes. And his bride to be seems to be in the episode too, so that'll be interesting to see how all that ties into it. I think we're building up to Orietta going fully off the rails. I mean, she just killed her boss for her own good, and she's about to figure out Ethel was the one who wrote the letter. But I think we're gonna get a Lorne Mavo type scene in the last episode where just in season 1 how Lorne Malvo got shot a bunch of times by Gus, and then he like wakes up again, and you're like, oh my god, like he is literally like immortal and he's gonna kill everyone.
Yeah, I've got some Devil Watch thoughts, and I've also got some Zombie Watch thoughts, but with Devil Watch, I'm still so shocked at how little Orietta we've been getting, and there's still hours to go this season, so there's plenty of time for her to make a re-entry into the story as a big part. But they've been teasing her out and teasing her out and teasing her out. She has to go somewhere huge, because I'm just trying to think of all the different ways that this season could end. Is she the last one standing? If so, that's not that interesting. Is she going to get taken away to jail? And then she is revealed to be the wife of Zombie Man. But no, with Orietta, I think this right now I'm as confused as I've ever been with where they're going with Orietta.
Totally. And but I will argue it is weird though that the first time we saw him, it was in between the houses, and it was also a scene that was directly relating to Deffy and Otis. Like the first time we saw him, it technically wasn't even related to any race things, but I think that's where it's gonna go. And I think the Lemuel thing was really good to bring up, because I think Zombie Man is the representation of race relations in America. Like I can definitely see that. Like if he just in general is just like representative of like the old white person that's always haunting the black community. Like that would be pretty powerful and really interesting, in like a literary sense. We always talk about Noah Hawley's fucking writing novels all the time, and no, this is definitely like representative of something. Like this is like an allegory. This is like a metaphor for something, and it's something you don't see in TV nowadays, which is pretty interesting. But yeah, and it might not be, as we talked about earlier, it might not be like exactly like how people actually deal with race, but it's definitely like interesting to watch and like analyze from a creative standpoint.
What you just mentioned about it be about the character of Zombie Man, being introduced with being introduced with Otis and Defi. Technically, he's obviously been most prominent with Ethelreda, and so I've thought of it as purely related to Ethelreda and the Smutney family. But maybe this episode was the first time that we start to hint at Zombie Man being an overarching angel of death, as opposed to just the curse on the Smutney family. That would be actually really interesting in a literary sense, like you're talking about. I think it would be. This would have to be the very first sprinkling of that, and they would have to continue to do that going out throughout the season.
And I just say that because I think he's appeared too much in little points not to have like a big reveal. Like we were talking about with Orietta. Like I still think Orietta's had enough time where like you could kind of do an anticlimactic end to her character. And like we also do have to remember like not every Fargo character has a climactic end. Like I felt, yes, Lester beat Lauren Malvo at the end, but I still felt like his ending was a little anticlimactic. Similar to the UFO stuff in season 2, they mention it way too much with Zombie Man that like he has to have like a big reveal at the end, whether that be every character sees it or like just like you start slowly seeing like what he is representative of. The haunting of like that white figure from your past, you know, like that is basically the police too in a lot of ways.
I think the big point is that Zombie Man, who was just a throwaway little goof for us at first, is really actually, and I mean we're goofing around but also being serious. He's actually going to be a thing this season. Like this is not just a side moody piece of set decoration. This is actually going to be a part of the thematic conclusion of season 4 of Fargo. That's so insane.
Yeah, which is crazy because he first appeared in episode 3 or 4. I think 3 episode 3. Episode 4 he appeared. It was our episode 3, I think technically. So yeah, it is really interesting to see that he should play a big role. But I'm excited. This episode was really fantastic, I think. I think it also confirmed for me, like, you're reading chapters this season. Like, each episode has chapters within themselves. Like, for example, this episode started with an Orietta chapter, and then it ended with, like, I would say, like, a Loy chapter. And then throughout, like, you switch from, like, Otis's point of view to, like, Loy's point of view to, like, Gaetano's at a brief second. But, like, similar to, like, the vast Game of Thrones novels, this has, like, point of view characters each time, and, like, they might not be the main character, but they all, like, work together to form a cohesive story.
Yeah, that's very well put. And I think that in season 2, we were kind of spoiled with the introduction of the Martin Freeman narration of the like murders of the Midwest or whatever the book was called. And that really set the season in a different context, like as in a historical context. This season, we open it up with Ethelreda giving a history lesson. And so I wasn't quite primed to think of it as like a novel, but it basically is just like chapters in a novel or chapters in a history book in the same sort of way. Yeah.
And I'm really excited for next week's episode, as always. Yeah, I don't have too much to say. We had some nice comments last review, which was really nice. Please put some more down there. We'd love to hear your thoughts on the episode. If you think like Zombie Man's gonna play as big of a part as we do, if you do think this is a dream, like who do you think's the dreamer? And like we were saying, like, do you guys feel like it's like pretty novelistic this season? And what does that just say about like Noah Hawley in general in this season? Gonna be a lot of fun. Hopefully we'll see Dr. Senator next episode.
If we get a Dr. Senator, Dr. Harvard, and Zombie Man crossover scene from Beyond the Grave, that would I think that's how the season should end.
Yeah, that'd be pretty beautiful. Because they all go to heaven, definitely. Those
For
three
sure.
guys.
Zombie Man is 100% going to heaven.
Right on. We'll see you next week.